If you're a parent of a school child, like I am, you have probably experienced this situation many times before. You see your child desperately trying to solve their homework. And you sometimes wonder, is it really necessary? Is it really necessary? Can't teachers just give them easier tasks that they can solve successfully? It doesn't get better in higher education. Many of you in this room probably know this situation very well. Remember the last time your professor gave you a task that you could just not figure out how to solve. Now, are teachers and professors bad during the job? Wouldn't it be much easier and better if they did teach the students how to solve a particular problem type successfully and then give them easy practice problems? That seems much more promising. But not every success is productive. In fact, if a student solves tasks successfully right off the bat because they simply apply a solution method that was taught to them, they may get an illusion of competence. They may think they know how to solve the problem, while in fact they haven't really understood it. And while in fact, if they got more challenging and novel problems, they wouldn't know what to do. This is not what we as educators would want. On the flip side, not every struggle is unproductive. Struggling is a bother, and it requires persistence, but it can in fact be productive for learning. In our research, my colleagues and I are looking at the conditions of what makes struggling productive for learning. We look at the learning processes that are necessary for students in order to be able to benefit from struggling. So a lot of my research is concerned with productive failure. The person who coined this term and founded this research paradigm is Manu Kapoor. He's the researcher currently at ETH Zurich, formerly was a professor at the National Institute of Education. But let's drop the term failure for this discussion and use struggle instead. Struggle puts the emphasis on the process of trying and of trying to solve the problem instead of the result. This is what learning to solve a new problem type usually looks like. You get an explanation, you're being taught how to apply a certain solving procedure, and then you get practice problems where you can try to apply the newly learned procedure. And you do this over and over again. Now the productive failure paradigm switches the order of this. Problem solving comes first, and later we receive instruction. When being confronted with a novel problem that you do not know how to solve, you're struggling. And this struggle is what may actually be effective for learning. There are multiple empirical studies that show that this struggle prepares you for being able to take up from the subsequent instruction what is important and to learn from it. And it requires the deeper understanding that you need in order to solve novel problems later. Well, this has been very researchy so far. I'm a researcher. I work here at Ruhr-Universität. But let's look at a real problem. So in this task, in this typical productive failure task, what a mother does is that she orders pizza for her son's birthday party. For the 6 boys, she orders 4 pizzas with sausage. For the 3 girls, she orders 2 pizzas with tuna. Now the students are tasked to distribute the pizza and find out if the boys and the girls, each individually, receive the same amount of pizza. However, they have not been taught the concept of fraction equivalence, nor do they know how to cancel out or expand fractions. Well, now you're going to need these. You have them all in your bags. Because now we're going to pretend that we're students trying to solve this problem. All right, so what do? We have these pizzas. Well, let's start with something that we probably usually do at home. We cut the pizzas in quarters. That seems fair, right? Then we get equal pieces that we can easily distribute between the kids in our birthday party. For the boys' pizzas, we get 16 quarters altogether. For the girls' pizzas, we get 8 quarters altogether. If we divide them, 16 divided by 6, we can give every boy 2 quarters. We have some left over. We can also give the 2 girls, the 3 girls, 2 quarters. Again, we have some left over. That's unfortunate. I don't really know how we could distribute this leftover fairly. So maybe this wasn't the best solution method. Maybe we could cut the slices into smaller pieces. Maybe if we cut them in half, it will be possible. So let's do that. Let's cut the pizza into 8 pieces each. Now we have 32 pieces altogether on the boys' side and 16 pieces altogether on the girls' side. If we divide these by the number of kids, we can give each boy 5 pieces, and we can also give each girl 5 pieces. But again, we have some leftovers. So this was a more promising strategy, but in the end, we weren't able to completely solve this problem. But we tried, and in trying, we applied some of our prior knowledge that we brought to this problem. And this is actually one of the first important mechanisms in learning from struggling. We also had to notice that we weren't able to successfully solve the problem. We had to realize that our solution approaches did not work out. We always had some pizza left over. So we also had to learn what we didn't know. We had to identify our knowledge gaps. That's the second mechanism behind learning from struggling. And in having identified those knowledge gaps, this will allow us to benefit from the explanation that we will receive afterwards. Now, what is our role as teachers and educators in this? The 2 processes that I was just talking about don't just magically happen. I think you see where this is going. It's up to us to design tasks that allow our students to activate their prior knowledge and to identify knowledge gaps. But how can we design such tasks? Well, let's get back to the pizza problem. The instructor who designed the pizza problem had in mind typical misconceptions that students have. So what would students do when you present them with such a task? You can actually go home later after this and try it with your kids, with your nieces and nephews, or even with your roommate. I think they will do exactly what we just did. They would divide the pizza by 4, or they would divide it by 8, because it seems obvious that this leads to equal parts that you can distribute. But taking one of these approaches also inevitably leads to a dead end. It leads to a situation where if you have to divide by the number of students we had here, 6 boys and 3 girls, you will have leftover pieces. And that's exactly what the instructor intended to do. So there were 2 important design principles incorporated in this task. First of all, it was designed to be at a sweet spot between challenging and too difficult. It was challenging because we had to struggle with it as we were students, and we weren't able to solve it. But it wasn't too difficult because we were able to apply some of our prior knowledge, to activate our prior knowledge. And that's important. Only if we can activate prior knowledge will the struggling be productive. If it's way too difficult and we still struggle, it's very likely that the struggle will be unproductive for learning. Another important mechanism here was that the task provided feedback to us that we were not correct, that our solution approach did not work out. The feedback was provided by the pieces that were left over. So, what is less obvious to kids when they solve this is that they should cut the pieces by the number of persons they're trying to distribute it among. in our case, 6 boys for the sausage pizza, and 3 girls for the tuna pizza. This is what students need to understand. And they also need to understand that, in fact, 2 of the 6 equals 1/3. This is important to understand in order to not only be able to solve this one particular pizza problem, but also be able to solve similar problems later. And here comes another important aspect in this design. When we start explaining to the students how to solve such problems, we have to take up their ideas, their solution approaches, their misconceptions, in order to help them understand the structure of the problem, and in order for them to gain an understanding not just of how to apply a particular solution method, but why. This is important for transfer to new problems, from pizza to candy, to chocolate, to cake, or even more generally speaking, to fraction comparisons problems. I have a final point for you to consider. A very important prerequisite of learning productively from struggling that you have to consider is to establish a classroom culture that allows for struggling. Only if students are not afraid to try out solution approaches that will probably be incorrect and with which they will probably fail, can the struggle become productive for learning. So in summary, there's a lot for us as teachers and educators if we want to make struggling productive for learning. It doesn't come for free, but as I hope I was able to convince you, it's worth it. This last point about classroom culture is also very important for us as parents. We have to support our children in persisting and in not giving up and in staying motivated. We have to convey that struggle is not only okay, it is in fact productive for learning. I want to end my presentation with a quote from one of the most influential psychologists of the 21st century, Boris F. Skinner. A failure is not always a mistake. It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. The real mistake is to stop trying. Thank you.